"Mom, you don't need to come this summer," my son David mumbled through the phone. I paused, holding a stack of folded towels. "Sarah thinks it's better if we keep the lake house for our immediate family this year." Immediate family. The words hung in the air. I had spent 3 years and a large chunk of my late husband's savings building that lake house in upstate New York. I bought the land, I picked the tiles, and I paid the contractors. Yet here was my 35-year-old son casually uninviting me from my own property. "I see," I replied softly. "It's just that Sarah's parents are coming up, and with the kids, it'll be too crowded." He added, his voice lacking any real apology. "You understand, right?" I didn't scream or remind him whose name was on the deed. Arguing with David when his wife Sarah was pulling his strings always proved useless. "Have a good summer, David," I answered and pressed the end button. I stood in my bedroom in Ohio, staring at the open suitcase on my bed. At 68, I thought I knew exactly how my retirement years would play out. Weekends by the water, watching my grandchildren fish off the dock I designed. But reality just shifted. I calmly unpacked the towels, returning them to the linen closet. I wasn't going to cry over a vacation. Instead, I walked down to my home office, turned on my computer, and opened my banking portal. If I wasn't considered immediate family anymore, I certainly didn't need to be their immediate bank account. I clicked on the Scheduled Payments tab. It was time to make some adjustments. The lake house wasn't a cheap property to run. Since it was finished 2 years ago, I had covered everything: high-speed internet, electricity, water, landscaping, and the expensive pest control service. David and Sarah treated it like an all-inclusive resort. They showed up, opened the fridge, and relaxed. I selected the Wi-Fi account first. Cancel autopay. Next went the electricity and the water. I didn't shut them off. I just removed my credit card information. The disrespect hadn't started with this phone call. It began last Thanksgiving. I arrived at the lake house to find my favorite reading chair shoved into the garage. Sarah had replaced it with a modern, uncomfortable sofa that she found on sale. Then came the reorganization of the kitchen. My cast iron pans were moved to the highest shelf out of my reach. I let it slide to keep the peace. Widows often tolerate a lot just to keep the house filled with voices. But exclusion was a line I wouldn't let them cross. 2 days later, my phone buzzed. It was David. "Mom, did something happen to the credit card on the internet account? The Wi-Fi is down." I sipped my morning coffee, looking out at my garden. "Oh, I removed my card. Since you and Sarah are treating the house as your family's private getaway, I figured you would want to handle the utilities." "Wait, what? The electricity too?" He sounded frantic. "Yes. Have a wonderful time with Sarah's parents." I ended the call. My phone buzzed 3 more times. I ignored it and went outside to water the hydrangeas. But the seed of a much larger idea had already been planted. A week passed in quiet peace. I didn't check in on them, and they were likely too proud or too busy setting up their utility accounts to call me. But I needed a few things from the lake house. My husband's old fishing journals and a customized quilt my sister made were still in the master bedroom. I decided to drive up on a Tuesday. David and Sarah both worked weekdays in the city, so the house would be empty. The 3-hour drive usually brought me joy. Today, it just felt like a chore. When I pulled into this gravel driveway, the place looked beautiful. The porch swing I installed swayed in the summer breeze. I grabbed my keychain and slid the brass key into the front door lock. It wouldn't turn. I pulled it out, wiped it, and tried again. Nothing. I walked around to the back patio door. That key didn't work either. I stood there, the warm sun hitting my back, processing the reality. They hadn't just uninvited me. They had changed the locks. A neighbor, an older gentleman named Tom, who managed some properties nearby, waved from his yard. "Teresa, didn't expect you today. David had a locksmith out here last Friday. Said the old lock was sticking. Did he? I smiled tightly. Good to know. Thanks, Tom. I didn't break a window. I didn't call David screaming. I simply walked back to my car, opened the glove compartment, and pulled out the hidden emergency lockbox key I had installed under the porch stairs, a lockbox David didn't know existed. I retrieved the spare physical key from the box. It slipped into the new lock perfectly. I stepped inside my house, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The house didn't look like mine anymore. Every framed photo of my late husband and me had been taken down from the mantel. In their place were large canvas prints of Sarah's family. I walked down the hall to the master bedroom, my room. The bed was stripped. My oak dresser had been shoved into the corner to make room for a massive desk covered in Sarah's work monitors and marketing materials. My clothes were stuffed into cardboard boxes at the bottom of the closet. They were slowly erasing me from the home I built. I stood in the center of the room taking a deep breath. No tears came, just a sharp, icy clarity. I grabbed the boxes containing my clothes and carried them out to my trunk. Then I went back for the journals, the quilt, and a few small antique lamps I cherished. While packing the last box, I heard tires crunching on the gravel outside. I walked out to the porch. David's SUV was parked next to my sedan. He stepped out, looking panicked. Sarah stepped out from the passenger side, her face instantly twisting into a scowl. Teresa! Sarah crossed her arms. What are you doing here? We told you my parents were coming this weekend. I'm retrieving my belongings, I answered calmly, setting a box in my trunk. David looked at the front door, then at my hands. How did you get in? The lock. He stopped realizing his mistake. You changed the locks on my house, David. I shut my trunk with a firm thud. Without asking. It was a security upgrade. Sarah chimed in quickly. We were going to mail you a copy. I'm sure you were. I walked past them, climbed into the driver's seat, and rolled down the window. Enjoy the weekend. I drove away, leaving them staring at the dust. I knew exactly what my next move would be. Back in Ohio, my younger daughter Lily dropped by for dinner. Lily lived an hour away and always respected my boundaries. Unlike David, she had never asked for a dime since graduating college. As we ate at the dining table, I told her about the changed locks and the boxes in the closet. Lily set her fork down, her eyes flashing with anger. Mom, you can't let them do this. You need to kick them out. No, I shook my head. No drama, no messy family warfare. I don't want to fight for a space that I shouldn't have to fight for. So, you're just going to let Sarah take over your retirement home? Absolutely not. I took a sip of my water. I realized something today, Lily. A house is just wood and glass. The dream I had for that place died when David decided his wife's entitlement mattered more than my dignity. I don't want the house anymore. Lily leaned back, studying my face. What are you going to do? I pulled a business card from my pocket and slid it across the table. It belonged to a local real estate agent I had spoken to briefly a year ago when she sold the lot next door. I'm selling it, I stated evenly. The market is peaking. I hold the deed free and clear. David and Sarah want a free vacation home. They're about to get a very expensive reality check. Lily read the card, a slow smile spreading across her face. Do you need help packing the rest of the furniture? No, I smiled back. I'm selling it fully furnished. Sarah can keep the new sofa. The real estate agent, a sharp woman named Brenda, met me at a local coffee shop the following morning. I handed her the property details. It's a gorgeous property, Teresa. Brenda noted, reviewing the photos she had on file from the neighboring lot. If we list this quietly as a private off-market sale, I have a dozen buyers who would bid today. No open houses needed. That is exactly what I want. I nodded. I want a fast closing, preferably before the 2nd of August. Brenda raised an eyebrow but didn't pry. Cash buyers only then. I can make that happen. I signed the listing agreement right there on the small cafe table. Over the next 2 weeks, I lived my life normally. I joined my book club, tended to my garden, and ignored the occasional text from David asking why I was acting so distant. He didn't apologize for the locks. He just wanted to know if I was going to pay the property taxes due in September. I simply replied, "Don't worry about the taxes." 3 days later, Brenda called. "Teresa, I have an all-cash offer. An older couple from Chicago looking for a turnkey summer home. They love the furniture, the location, everything. They are offering 20% over the asking price if we can close by July 28th. Accept it," I answered without hesitation. The paperwork was handled entirely online. I didn't even need to drive back up to the lake. As I digitally signed the final transfer document, I felt a massive weight lift from my shoulders. The lake house was officially gone. And my bank account had gained a very comfortable sum. August the 2nd arrived, a bright, warm Saturday. This was the weekend David and Sarah had proudly announced they were hosting Sarah's entire extended family for an annual reunion. They had been planning it for months, assuming my house would be their free venue. I sat on my back patio sipping iced tea, a book resting on my lap. At exactly 11:15 a.m., my phone began to ring. It was David. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang again. Then, a third time. I finally swiped the green button. "Hello," I answered breezily. "Mom, what is going on?" David sounded completely out of breath. "We just pulled up to the lake house with Sarah's parents, and there are people inside. There's a moving truck in the driveway." "Oh, yes," I replied, calmly turning a page in my book. The new owners were planning to move some of their personal things in this weekend. Silence stretched over the line. "New owners," he choked out. "Yes, David. I sold the house last week." I heard a muffled shriek in the background. "Sarah, you sold it without telling us." David yelled, his passive demeanor completely shattered. "It's my property, David. I built it with my money, so I sold it." I took a sip of tea. "You told me I wasn't needed this summer. You changed the locks. I assumed you had moved on, so I did too. But Sarah's entire family is here. Where are we supposed to go?" "There's a nice hotel off the interstate," I suggested mildly. "Enjoy your vacation." I hung up and turned my phone on silent. They didn't go to the hotel. 3 hours later, David's SUV aggressively pulled into my driveway in Ohio. I watched through the window as he and Sarah marched up to my front door. Sarah looked furious, her face flushed red. I opened the door before they could knock. I didn't unlatch the screen door. "How could you do this?" Sarah demanded, immediately pointing a finger at the screen. That house was supposed to stay in the family. We invested time in it. "You bought a couch and changed my locks." "Sarah," I corrected her softly, "you didn't invest a single dollar." David stepped forward, looking miserable. "Mom, you humiliated us. Her parents had to drive all the way back home. We were treating that place like it was ours. That was exactly the problem." I looked directly into my son's eyes. "You treated it like it was yours while treating me like a nuisance. I will not be a guest in a home I paid for." "It was an inheritance," Sarah snapped. "You practically stole from your own grandchildren." I laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh, just a genuine reaction to her audacity. Inheritance is a gift left by the dead. I am very much alive. My money belongs to me. "David, say something." Sarah pushed his arm. David looked at his shoes, then at me. "Mom, what are we supposed to do for holidays now?" "You're adults. Figure it out." I stepped back and closed the heavy wooden door, locking it securely. I didn't need to hear another word. The fallout was loud but short-lived. For a few weeks, Sarah posted passive-aggressive quotes on social media about toxic family members. I simply blocked her account. David tried calling a few times, mostly to complain about how much the emergency hotel had cost them that weekend. I kept the conversations under 2 minutes. I realized something vital during those short calls. By taking away the free house, I had forced them to face their own financial reality. They couldn't afford the lifestyle they were pretending to have. Lily came over one afternoon to help me sort through the boxes I had brought back. "You know, David called me yesterday." Lily mentioned folding my husband's quilt. "He asked if I knew how much you sold the house for." "And what did you say?" I told him it was none of his business. She grinned. "He's just panicked because Sarah wants to buy a vacation home now and they can't even afford the down payment." "That's their journey to navigate," I replied, placing a picture frame on my desk. "I spent my 30s and 40s saving every penny with your father. If David wants a lake house, he can start saving." I wasn't angry anymore. The lingering resentment I had felt over the past year had vanished the moment the deed transferred. Establishing a boundary isn't about punishing someone else. It's about protecting your own peace. And my peace was completely restored. 6 months passed. Winter settled over Ohio, blanketing my neighborhood in quiet white snow. The massive echoing rooms of the lake house were a distant memory, replaced by the cozy, manageable warmth of my 3-bedroom ranch. I didn't buy another vacation property with the sale money. I didn't need another project to manage or another roof to fix. Instead, I booked a month-long trip to Italy with 2 other widows from my book club, a trip my late husband and I had always talked about but never took. Yesterday, I went to the mall and bought a set of ridiculous bright yellow hard-shell luggage. Sarah would have called it tacky. I thought it was absolutely perfect. I also made a visit to my financial advisor. I set up secure educational trusts for my grandchildren. The stipulations were ironclad. The funds could only be drawn directly to a university for tuition, and David and Sarah had zero administrative access. I mailed the confirmation certificates to my grandchildren in bright blue envelopes, bypassing their parents entirely. Taking away the free house didn't mean I stopped being a grandmother. It just meant I stopped being a doormat. I was sitting by the fireplace, drinking chamomile tea and reviewing my Rome itinerary when my phone vibrated on the coffee table. The screen flashed David's name. I let it ring twice before picking up. "Hello, David." "Hi, Mom." His voice it was surprisingly subdued, carrying a nervous hesitation I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. "I know we haven't talked much lately. I just wanted to see how you were doing." "I'm doing wonderfully. I leave for Rome next week." A heavy pause hung on the line. "Wow, Rome. That's great." He cleared his throat. "Listen, the kids have been asking about you a lot. Sarah and I are hosting a small dinner for them next weekend. Just burgers in our backyard. If you're free before your trip, we'd love it if you came." He didn't ask for a loan. He didn't casually assume my availability. For the first time in years, he was just a son inviting his mother over, acutely aware that she had the power to say no. "I'll have to check my schedule," I answered warmly but firmly. "But thank you for the invitation, David." When the call ended, I smiled. We weren't perfectly healed. I knew Sarah would likely always harbor some bitterness about the lake house, and our relationship would never return to the unconditionally generous dynamic it once was. But the foundation had permanently shifted. I was no longer the passive provider they could push aside. I was an invited guest in their home, just as they had made me feel in mine. I picked up my pen, checked off another item on my packing list, and listened to the crackling fire. I had built a beautiful house once, but I finally realized that my true home was the peace I carried within myself. Have you ever had to set a firm boundary with your own family to protect your peace? It's never an easy decision, but sometimes it is the only one left to make. Let me know how you handled it in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed my story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life lessons. Until next time, remember your worth.